hunting and gathering so important to Native people? Where does this cultural tradition come from? And is slightly different from one tribe to another. However, the teaching of the Anishinaabe people is that everything in creation was made and created for a purpose, and that each living thing on earth has its place in the circle of life. We as Anishinaabe people believe that animals were given to us by the Creator to feed us, clothe us, and to give us everything that we need to survive. And we must be thankful for that gift. After taking the life of an animal, it was very, very important to say a prayer to the animal and to the Creator, giving thanks and appreciation for that animal's life so that the hunter can then feed and clothe their family. It is also in the teaching that if we stop hunting, fishing, or gathering, that we are no longer showing appreciation and gratefulness for the gifts that the Creator has given us. If we no longer need the gifts of the Creator, then does that mean we no longer need the Creator? This would create a natural imbalance on Mother Earth. The second reason why hunting and gathering is so important to Native people is because we use all parts of the animal for survival. Taking the life of an animal is something that Native people did as a necessity, as a means for survival only. Traditional Indigenous people did not hunt, fish, or take the life of any living thing for sport, fun, or as a leisure activity. Prior to contact with the Europeans, Turtle Island, which is now known as North America, only had Native people and the resources provided by the Creator. Mother Earth, water, animals, plants, birds, etc. The animals that were hunted and killed were used in every way possible, so there was absolutely zero waste for that life that was taken. Any parts of the animal that wasn't used were left behind for the survival of the other animals. Hunting and gathering is so important to Native people is that it represents why Native people were nomadic and extremely resourceful. Traditional First Nations people were known to be nomadic, meaning that we did not settle in one specific area. This way of life was well aligned with our worldview, which is that the Mother Earth is a living spirit and the land does not belong to anyone. All living things were gifts from the Creator and they were all just borrowed. Some tribes specialized in the hunting and fishing that was according to their area and more local to their region and the specific resources that existed there. Some nations chose to stay in specific regions across North America, but many tribes traveled across Turtle Island as they were extremely resourceful. The Native American nations traveled across the land to find the resources that were best for that season, whether it be hunting game for food and supplies or gathering medicines, food, and eventually farming the land. The tribe would follow the animals and the resources that were plentiful at that time of year. In current day, many Native American people still hold true to their hunting and gathering roots and traditions. Most First Nations people who live on or near reservations consistently practice their hunting and gathering traditions today.
Hunting and how it all started. Native Americans. Hunting was a major part of Native American culture. Animals not only provided tribes with food, but with heat, clothing, tools, and even shelter. Little was wasted, and the Native Americans would often pause and give thanks to the animal for giving its life so they could provide for their families. The early Native Americans used hunting to mark a young brave's transition to manhood. It was believed that he was not yet a man until he had harvested a kill to feed his family. Camouflage tricks that kept the Native Americans hidden. The art of camouflage is vital to hunters and the hunted. When Europeans came to the New World, their idea of camouflage was one of single color, usually green or dark brown. Many early settlers in what would be America were taken hostage or killed because they never saw their captors until they were literally in front of them. The native people of America were masters of the art of camouflage. In fact, many believe that it was the indigenous people who were the first true inventors of camouflage. This skill gave them a tremendous advantage, regardless of the inferiority of their weapons. After all, you can't shoot what you can't see, and frequently don't hear. Camouflage also allowed native people to get closer to their prey. Before they could hope to get close, however, they had to find their prey. Tracking skills were taught from a very early age, and every Native American male had to learn them or starve. Camouflage skills. Paint. Native people learned early that being as quiet as possible, as well as blending in with their surroundings, made them next to invisible in their world. Of course, the camouflage would depend on the terrain. In summer months, men would paint their bodies and faces with streaks of green and white to appear as part of the summer leaves and sunlight. Long streaks of brown would run down the lengths of their arms so that they would appear like branches. Leggings were often painted or even made from different colored hides. In long brown and white vertical stripes to mimic tree trunks and dappled sunlight, leaves and small twigs were braided into the hair. Some warriors went so far as to paint small birds or lizards on their bodies to appear even more like their surroundings. In the fall or early spring, the green camouflage was exchanged for black, brown, yellow, and bits of red and gold to mimic the changing colors of the leaves and the dying foliage. Some of the paint used had spiritual or protective significance to the native people. The colors of the four directions, black, red, yellow, and white, for example, were thought to offer guidance and align the hunters with the forces of nature. Camouflage skills. Cover. Another well-known skill of the indigenous people was to cover themselves with something that appeared to be natural. If one wanted to hide among large gray or black boulders, a person would cover themselves in a gray or black or gray blanket. New settlers were impressed with just how close native people could get to their prey in order to kill or manipulate them. One technique that is well documented was the use of animal hides. Some animal intact as possible, including ears, tails, legs, and heads, faces minus the skull. Hunters would try to cover up their scent by rubbing grasses and bark over their bodies. Then, relying on an animal's poor eyesight, such as buffalo, deer, elk, and moose, they would cover themselves in the hide of a grass-eating animal and crawl or walk slowly, as if they were grazing animals. As long as they moved slowly and their scent did not betray them, many hunters were able to literally walk right up to an animal and either spare it or stab it. Another trick using the animal hide was for a dozen or so hunters to gradually work behind the herd to maneuver it so that it was close to cliffs or dead falls. When their prey was in position, they could throw off the hide and yell, frightening the herd. Often a great majority of the herd would run off the cliff and be killed on impact. Women and other hunters were waiting below to finish off the survivors and begin their task. The northern plains include what is now North and South Dakota, eastern Montana, northeastern Wyoming, and Canadian provinces of Alberta and Saskatchewan. For the Indian nations who called this region home, the single most important animal was the buffalo, technically bison, but commonly called buffalo. The buffalo provided them with food, clothing, shelter, and tools. For many of the Indian peoples, buffalo was real food, and the meat from other animals was considered inferior. Writing about the Blackfoot in his book, The Blackfeet Raiders on the Northwestern Plains, anthropologist John Evers says, "So long as there was buffalo available, these Indians needed no other meat. The buffalo provided the Blackfoot with more than 100 specific items of material culture. Every part of this animal is eaten by the Indians except the horns, hoofs, and hair. In addition to providing food, the buffalo skin was used for clothing and for lodges. The sinews were used for bowstrings and the bones were made into tools. While the popular image of Indians is that of the horse-mounted buffalo hunter, the horse as we know it today came to this continent with the Europeans. When the horse reached the plains in the early 1700s, it dramatically changed the Indian ways of life. After the acquisition of the horse, the buffalo could be hunted from horseback. The Blackfoot would use the straightaway chase, in which each hunter singled out an animal in the herd, rode alongside of it, and killed it at close range. The hunter would then continue on to another animal. The weapons used for buffalo hunting included the bow and arrow, and the lance. In hunting buffalo from horseback, the preferred weapon was the bow and arrow, even after firearms became common. The bow was preferred for two reasons. One, it was difficult to reload a muzzle-loading gun at full gallop, and the hunter could easily reclaim the animals by looking at and identifying their own arrows. Writing about the crow in the Handbook of North American Indians, anthropologist Fred Wojet reports, "A man's average kill was 4 or 5 buffalo, but successful hunters might kill 15 buffalo in one hunt, identifying their kill by the marks on their arrows." With regard to the bow and arrow, Minette Johnson, writing about the gross venture in her master's thesis Return of the Native Buffalo Restoration at the Fort Belknap Reservation, reports, "The bow and arrow remained the weapons of choice because they could be shot accurately at high speeds and be reloaded easily. The hunters aimed their arrows behind the last rib bone of the buffalo, so it would penetrate the lungs, killing even the largest of the bulls. Blackfoot Chief Mountain Chief describes hunting buffalo with a bow and arrow. Sometimes when a hunter rode side by side with a buffalo and shot the animal, the arrow would go clear through. The Indians were very proud and careful with their arrows. They did not wish to break them. That is the reason why they shot them on the side, so that when the buffalo fell, the arrow would not be broken. With regards to the use of the lands by Cheyenne buffalo hunters, George Bird Grinnell, in his book The Cheyenne Indians, Their History and Lifeways writers, the rider usually ran up on the right side of the animal and held the lance across the body. The right hand the higher. The buffalo was little ahead of the horse, and the man using both hands thrust with his lance downward and forward. While the lance was most commonly used before iron-tipped arrows were common, it continued to be used until the end of buffalo hunting. Among the Assiniboine horse-mounted hunters supervised by the Soldier Society and using bows and arrows would surround the buffalo herd. In an hour's time, 80 to 100 hunters could kill 100 to 500 buffalo. The hunter who killed the animal claimed the hide and the choicest pieces of meat. All who aided in the butchering were entitled to a portion of the meat.